Welcome to Compass Stories. I'm your host, Veronica Sterling. And my work is centered on helping people who are in the middle of disruption rediscover meaning, strengthen connection, and move forward with courage. I do this through speaking, sharing experiences, and storytelling. I'm grateful that you've joined me for a conversation today. And if it resonates with you, I hope that you will share it with someone else in your life. Thanks for being here. Today I'm talking to Kenny Schroeder. He has 30 years of service as a fireman, and he's currently a lieutenant in the Fort Mitchell, Kentucky Fire Department. Kenny's also a dedicated advocate for first responder wellness and peer support. He does a lot of great work to make sure that others have access to resources and they don't have to face some of their hardest moments alone. I had an opportunity to work with Kenny recently. He is one of the leaders who puts on the annual Brain and Body Wellness for First Responders Symposium in Northern Kentucky. If you are anywhere in the tri-state region, I hope that you will find a way to put this on your calendar and attend. It's an excellent event with excellent programs and resources. This conversation today is a very meaningful one. I learned a lot from Kenny. He speaks very candidly about what happened to him in his life as he stepped away for a period of time from this career that shaped so much of his identity. He's going to speak about how that transition and the stress and trauma from the job led him into a deeply personal struggle. Kenny's going to tell us in this story that at one point he was trying to find a way forward and he was told that he was failing. I think for a lot of us, that just might have been enough to maybe think it was proof that we were, but not for Kenny. He kept going and he chose a different path. And I'm so grateful that he took this time to open up and share his journey with all of us. I'm really glad that you're here for it. Let's get started. Kenny, thank you for joining me on the podcast today and for being a bit of a guinea pig, because you're the very first guest that I've ever pressed record to do an interview with. So I think a lot of kids dream about becoming a firefighter, but we don't always realize the burden that can be carried by being a hero. And before we get into that, though, tell me about yourself and how you became a firefighter.
Thank you, first and foremost, for having me on as your guest. Humbled and grateful, to say the least. And I just really appreciate that. So thank you. So yeah, my name's Kenny Schroeder. Growing up, there were a couple things that I thought that I wanted to be. One of them was a race car driver, and the other one was a firefighter. Really didn't know which one was going to pan out. I actually, in retrospect, did drive a race car, a NASCAR race car, and an experience at a racetrack. And it's a good thing I picked firefighting because I wasn't very good at driving.
Well, that's funny.
But growing up, it was something I thought of. I didn't have a family member that was a firefighter. There was nobody before me, to show me the ropes. There was not really, I didn't have a first responder role model to show me the ropes at all. So it was just, if I was going to do it, I had to do it. So it really didn't happen for me until I was in high school, my senior year of high school. And we had to do some service hours for the high school that I went to as part of the senior year. So instead of going and helping the homeless or another cause like that, I decided that I would go and learn or ask to be taught CPR. I didn't just say, "Hey, do this for me." I asked if it was something that was possible. So I went to my local fire department, the Independence Fire District, and asked if they would teach me CPR. And they said, "Sure." And I said, "Okay." So the first time I stepped foot into the firehouse, so it was just an amazing experience for me. It was like a home that I never knew that I could be at, that I needed, that I wanted. It was just that kind of experience, like probably like a kid walking into Disney World for the very first time. It was just that type of energy of this is it. This is what I've been looking for a while. So they taught me CPR. They also showed me what it was like to make runs. While I was there a couple of times, they made emergency runs. And I'm like, oh man, that's so cool. And they came back and they were rolling up the hose. And I was like, oh man, that's so cool. And so it was just a really neat experience to see that and to step into that culture. And then from there, I was hooked and just continued on my role. So now today, I'm a lieutenant with the Fort Mitchell Fire Department, also a paramedic. I've been in the fire service now for a combined total of 31 years. So the joke that I usually tell is that I started when I was 5 years old, just so I don't feel older than I am. Now that the cat out is out of the bag for saying that I started when I was 18, everybody knows.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's that's what I currently do.
And you retired, but you didn't stay retired for very long, I don't think.
Correct. So I retired
Okay.
from the Independence Fire District. So that same place where I got my start as a volunteer is where I went to work eventually full time. I started full time there in 2002, right after 9/11. And then I worked for 20 years. So when I got into the retirement system through Kentucky, it was still 20 years that you could work and then you could retire. So after 20 years, I retired in September of 2022. And then that's also a very pivotal moment for my personal life when things began to change for me. So I knew when I retired that I wasn't retiring just to go off and live on a remote island somewhere and do absolutely nothing. Like there was a plan for me in retirement as far as like why I was retiring, but I also knew that I had hoped that there was something beyond that.
uh, it's kind of a more traditional path to think, oh, we're going to work for 40 years and retire and, be in our 60s or 70s. You were 40 in your 40s, maybe earlier than that.
Yeah, so I was 45.
45 and retired.
Right.
So what did that feel like? And then how did it create a pivot for you?
Yeah, so to say that 45 and retired, that sounds pretty amazing. But for me, it was anything but amazing. So just to give you a little backstory on it, what I did as a firefighter was I made firefighting my purpose. Like that was who I was. If you would have asked me up until the point I was retired who I was, I would have said, "Oh, I'm a firefighter. Don't you know? Don't you know I'm a firefighter?" And it was nothing else. Like, yeah, I was a husband, I was a father, I was a friend, I was all that, but for me, who I thought I was a firefighter. So when that occurred, when I retired and I no longer had that as being who I was, my identity, I didn't know who I was. I really struggled at that point in time. I lost my identity. My relationships, my closest relationships were really struggling at that point. My family, my wife, my kids, all of them, they didn't want to be around me, and that hurt. I didn't understand why. I know a lot of the science now behind it, but in their eyes, I was really being an ass, and to say that, but to also say that I wasn't doing it on purpose. Like I wasn't being an ass just to be an ass. There's science now behind why I was acting the way I was. So my relationship struggled. my connection to the fire service, it was cut off. Like, and that's one thing. Maybe they tell you, maybe they don't. I'm not really sure, but for me, once I retired, those connections are cut off. Like, you don't get the email anymore. You don't get the runs. Like, you can't see those
Yeah.
coming in on your phone anymore. So you don't know what's going on. So you just really feel lost. And that's where I was. I was completely lost. I was definitely turning to substances such as alcohol to help cope, numb out, whatever, just as a way to not feel what I was feeling, and really spiraled out of control to the point where, I was just ready to be done suffering, ready
Yeah.
to just be done with my life.
Mhm. And thank you for being so open to share your story publicly. Um, I'm certain that stepping forward and sharing a message is helping other people. Do you think there's a story that you were telling yourself in that season, like before everything started to crack?
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, that the story I was telling myself was, I'm okay. I'm fine. Everybody would ask, like, how's it going? Oh, I'm fine. I'm good. That was the story I was telling myself. Also being in the profession, you had asked or mentioned it as we were beginning. Being in this profession of being a quote unquote hero, comes with a heavy price. And it's a price that we put on ourselves, as far as, like, we have to be strong, we have to be stoic, we have to almost appear as though we're not human, and that anything that we see, that we deal with, that we struggle with, that we have to stuff it. We can't let it show. We just have to stuff it deep down and pretend like it doesn't affect us. So that was definitely the story that I was telling myself. And it was strange. Again, looking back now, it was very strange that I would gravitate towards all of these different resources, all of this help, be it physical help, be it mental help, whatever it may be. I would gravitate towards that, but I would gravitate towards it so that I could give it away, because it was like, all right, my department needs this, my peers need this, my family needs this. That's why I was doing it. That was the story I was telling myself as to why I was doing it. It wasn't because I needed it. It was because, I was trying to do good for everybody else. So I just find that very interesting that, I was so connected and so close to it, but yet, I couldn't get the help. I couldn't say, yes, I needed the help. I couldn't reach out and get the help.
Yeah, I think it's easier to help others than it is to help ourselves a lot of the times. Yeah, I find that in my own life.
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
you said to me once in another conversation that you have to reach the point on your own where you decide that you're done suffering. And that's when you can then start finding a way to seek help. What is that moment for you?
That moment was, again, that retirement period for me, leading up to it, and then especially after it. So, leading up to it, as I had mentioned, my relationships, especially my marriage relationship, was really a struggle. My wife and I we were not communicating well. There was a lot of tension, a lot of stress. And my best thinking as to going into retirement was that if I could alleviate this stress of work, that maybe I could make things better at home. Maybe it would lighten the load, and marriage would get better. Kids would want to be around me. I'm home all the time. Like, that's got to be a joy, right? Let's get grumpy old dad at home, because that's going to make everything better. But that was my thinking going into it. And so, again, when that didn't happen, it was like, all right, I really don't know what to do. I don't know what else to do. I don't know where else to turn. So for the first month of being retired, I really struggled just trying to figure out what was next. Didn't want to wake up, didn't want to get out of bed, didn't want to call anybody, didn't want to talk to anybody, a lot of isolation. To go to bed was, again, drinking alcohol just to be able to go to sleep so I could turn off all of the noise, because it's constant. Like, uh, the way I pictured it was just a mouse on a wheel, just constantly going in my head of
Mm,
like, all right, this is what we got to do. This is what we're thinking about. And it was silly things, it was all things that I couldn't really control anyway. So it wasn't until I said yes to going to a firefighter wellness conference in October that I was able to start to get the help that I needed. Just to back up a little bit, my wife and I were going to marriage counseling. This was the second attempt at marriage counseling. And it wasn't going well, to the point where the counselor was like, all right, I don't know what else to tell you. You're Neither one of you are doing the homework that I'm telling you to do, so I can't help you anymore, and so we failed that, so there was all this stuff leading up to this point where it was like, I'm failing at everything that I do. Everything that I'm touching is just turning to garbage, and I don't know what else to do. So, when we left that last appointment, the therapist said, "You need to do something for you," like looking at me, like, you need help, So I checked out and my wife actually went with me, to one of the local resources for just mental wellness, to do like a 72-hour inpatient hold. And we went up there, and there was aftercare for it as well as part of the program. And when I walked in there, it felt very strange to me. And even as we're sitting there, and again, my wife's with me, like it felt like I was being sold something, and almost felt like I was buying a used car. And I didn't like
okay.
that feeling. And again, not
Yeah.
taking away from the resources that are out there and available. That just wasn't it for me. It just didn't work for me. It wouldn't have worked for me. So we left that, and I was just again struggling with where to go next. So the next option on the table was the IAFF Center of Excellence, which is just for professional firefighters. It's the International Association of Firefighters. They have a facility in Maryland where you can go and again just be treated. They understand the culture, culturally competent clinicians to help work with you. So I was signed up, rostered, registered, whatever the language is, to go there. And the whole time I was again thinking, is this the right thing to do? I don't really want to be away from home for at least 30 days. That was the requirement, is you'll be there at least 30 days. So I really struggled with that. In the meantime, I said yes to going to this firefighter wellness conference in exotic Beaver Creek, Ohio, is what they call it. It's the Brothers Helping Brothers Firefighter Wellness Conference. So I had an invite from the two brothers that aren't brothers that put that on, Jim and Nick, to go up, and so very hesitant to go, but I ended up going. I said, you know what, I'll just go, and thinking in my mind of like, this is kind of a last ditch effort of like, maybe this will help, but I'm pretty certain it's not going to, but at least I'll be amongst peers. I'll be amongst friends, and it'll feel good to be back in that environment. And so I did.
Hmm.
And, thank God that I did, because it was in that moment that I heard about a program called Save a Warrior, that I knew nothing about really before going there. And the speaker that spoke about it, who happened to be the founder, but again, I didn't really know that at the time. Jake Clark, he was speaking about this program, and every word that was coming out of his mouth was ringing true for me, to the point where it felt like he was telling my story. It felt like he was talking about me, and I'm like, this guy doesn't even know me. How is he talking about my story? You know, Is my wife talked to him, like, what's going on here?
Yeah. Who
But
set
at
me
the
up for this?
Right, exactly. Where's the cameras? But at the end, he had asked, he said, I've got 2 spots in a cohort. So a cohort's what they call the program. So he had 2 spots in this cohort the following week. And he said, you put it out to the crowd. I know there's at least 2 of you that are struggling. Who is it? Just say who you are, and we've got you. And the whole time I'm thinking, "Oh my god, it's me, it's me. Like, I need this. Like, this is what I need. This sounds like exactly what I've been looking for." But I didn't, even then, I didn't have the courage to raise my hand and say, yes, it's me. So thankfully, again, by the grace of God, a good friend of mine was with me there, sitting at my table. He had his back to me. I was sitting behind him, and he raised his hand, and so Jake was like, all right, are you going to be one of my guys? And this individual said, no. Well, maybe, but no, I just have a question. And so he asked a question. It was about suicide, and how do you know when you're at the end of your rope? What are the signs and symptoms? And so Jake had answered him, and then he asked again, are you going to be my guy? And this individual said no, or he said, yes, I will, but only if I can take somebody with me. That was how he worded it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, just don't do it. Just don't, please don't do it. And Jake said, okay, we can do that. Is that guy here? And my friend said, yeah, he's sitting right behind me. Oh my gosh. But all while I was thinking, oh my gosh, thank you. Like, thank God, thank God somebody had the courage to point it out, throw me under the bus, whatever, but at least I was getting the help that I so desperately needed. So I was a mess the rest of that day. They took me into a room and did the logistics as far as getting registered for the cohort. And I went the following week. That individual that I was there with actually drove me there because I had felt like if I went there on my own, I may not go, just where I was in
Yeah.
my headspace. So he took me there. We had a great conversation on the way, dropped me off, leaned into the conversation, at 72-hour long conversation that you have there at Save a Warrior. It was just amazing, and really blew my mind. They don't give you any tools at Save a Warrior, so I will never use that term, but what it gave me was just an awakening, an awareness, just that there's a different way to live my life. And, because of that, I'm here today. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
Wow. Wow, that's incredible. That's and you say that you're glad that someone raised their hand and prompted you and someone drove you there so you would go through with it, but I'm hearing you tell me that this wasn't just some happenstance. You were actively looking for that thing for help. Yeah, so maybe they helped you get over the finish line, but you were really pushing yourself to get there. That's incredible.
Yeah, I had to get help. I knew I needed it. I just didn't know how, and it wasn't, I never felt safe enough either to say that I needed help. And I think that's a big part of the problem too. Just the culture, the first responder culture and the stigma associated with, it's just not, it has not been looked upon well to say I'm struggling and I need help. So that was part of it too.
What when you look at from then to now in that path, what has surprised you about your own stamina, your own growth?
Oh, there's a lot. Just again, like being here today, like that. If you would have asked me back then, what I saw for my future, I would have said, I really don't know. I don't, I was just surviving back then, really like every day it was just survival. And I was so completely exhausted that I would have just said, I don't know if I'm going to be around. So that's a surprise. That's a surprise that I'm here today. Another surprise is to be where I'm at today. There's so many things that I do that I'm grateful to do today that I didn't know that I'd ever have the chance to be able to do. And it's being in the roles that I can be in. First and foremost as my family, like being present for them. I went and stood in a line this morning, and this is not to impress anybody, but just to tell you how silly this is looking at it. I stood in a line when it's 20 degrees outside at a local retail store to wait to buy these thing called Nidos. which are like little squishy stress balls. It's apparently
Okay.
all the craze. But I
Okay.
stood in line just, because it's like that's important to my kids, it's important to my wife, and that's what I do today is things that matter and just being present for them. The ability to do that I'll never forget because every single holiday, like I measure kind of where I am at in my growth with holidays and events that come up. So the Christmas after I went to Save a Warrior, so Christmas of 2022, we went and had Christmas at my sister's house, and it was the first time I was sober for Christmas, and I was just blown away because I thought that all family functions had to have alcohol in them. That's what we did to kind of survive and cope. And it turns out they didn't. And I'm not making anybody wrong for this. Again, like if you
Sure.
enjoy
Yeah.
alcohol, perfect. But I went and the thing that amazed me was that I could have fun, and I even had more fun because I was present and I was sober, and just able to enjoy it. And I didn't have to take a day the next day to recover from it. So that was surprising. The year after that, the Christmas after that was, like, just to be present and even more thoughtful with the gifts, like, it was so cool to experience that and to see joy, to see joy in my wife and in my kids and know that, like, they could feel the love that I put behind the gifts was surprising. I didn't know I could feel that. I didn't know I was really capable of that. So, again, it's just expanded every single Christmas and every single holiday and every get together and even the in betwixt and in between of being present for my family every day is just cool. So even when I'm freezing my ass off. Um, so
Yeah.
that's family. Just at work, I went back to work. You had asked about that previously. I went back to work for a different agency, a different department, the Fort Mitchell Fire Department. That's where I am today. It was really neat because I could pick and choose a good problem, but a good problem for me, not so good problem for the industry. There are so many openings now for all first responders, police, fire, everyone, that I could really take my time and pick where I wanted to go. And so I picked a very proactive as far as health and wellness is concerned, like a place that really felt like home for me in the Fort Mitchell Fire Department. And kudos to them for creating that space because I know not all careers and environments and stuff like that are created equally. So it was a gift to be able to do that. So I get to work there now. It really is a gift. I'm grateful for that opportunity. I just wanted to be a firefighter and a paramedic when I signed up for this department. About a year into it, they had an opening for a lieutenant position, and they encouraged me to test for it. And I said, you know what, it's not really something I want to do, but sure, if that's what you want, I'll do it. And that was the easiest process I'd ever been involved in. It was so smooth and like there was no pressure. I'm sure there was no pressure because I didn't feel like it was something I had to have. But it was also because of the healing work that I had done up until that point. So this is a year and a half post Save a Warrior. So all of the work that I do as part of my daily practice was involved in that. So it was just an easy process for me. And the really cool thing was and the really cool thing I get to do every day now is I just get to be myself. I just get to be
Yeah.
me, and so it's not exhausting. It's like, gosh, I spent how much of my life pretending, that I was somebody else, pretending that I had to be somebody else, thinking that I had to be somebody else, and now I just get to be myself, and it's such a relief. And again, I'm not. That's not to say I'm not trying to impress anybody by saying that. It's such a gift to be who we're meant to be, as God created me to be. So that's what I really enjoy doing today. And so that goes into every aspect of my life. Being a peer supporter, all the wellness things that I love to do just because I love to do them, and especially that's giving back to the program Warrior that again gave me that awareness to be where I am today. that's a big part of what I do. So I've been working just to go back and be a shepherd and give back as much as possible. So it's really neat to witness other men, especially man, to be where I was, to know where I was in that position leading into Save a Warrior, to see them going back there, and then to know what's on the other side of that, to watch their transition, their transformation, to get their lives back. There's not much else that tops that. So
Hmm. So you kind of mentioned that there's daily work that you're doing now, and I can't imagine that you went to Save a Warrior and then this flip just switched and stayed switched in your whole life. Like, how are there habits, boundaries? What are you doing to keep yourself in this new space, this new frame of mind?
yeah, there's a lot. I think what I thought, and I'm sure I'm not alone, is that, I just wanted a quick fix. I'm like, all right, I feel broken. I really feel broken. I feel defective. I feel like I'm all alone. What's the quick fix? Like, what can I do to make me feel better instantly? And so there wasn't that. There's that's not around. It probably was on the days I could drink, it was that, like, that would take away the feelings of how I was feeling, but it didn't fix anything. It only made them worse, So when I went to Save a Warrior, it just gave me, again, this awareness. And when I left there, I felt like I was on a high. It was like, oh my gosh, like, really, it can be this easy. But there was so much work to be done after that. And so the first couple of weeks were terrible. They were so hard, so difficult. Working into sobriety, like that's a key, having to be sober. So that was a big focus. But the thing that they would tell you and remind you of is that, look, you just have to get to midnight. If you can just make it to midnight, then 12:01 starts a new day. And that day has the possibility for anything to happen. So there were days where it was like, all right, is it midnight yet? Like, come on, maybe the clock is just slow. Is it midnight yet? And it was just encouragement of myself, and the community. They give you an amazing community at Save a Warrior that you can lean on, and just you can pick up the phone anytime and call any of the men that are involved there, and just say, look, I'm struggling. Like, can you just hear me out? Can you just listen? So I did that a whole lot. Um, and it was just one day at a time. Like, there's no quick fix. It wasn't like I'm healed. It was just starting out and trying to change 1%, be 1% better every single day, just incorporate one new habit every single day. So maybe it's making the bed, maybe I got out of bed, that's a plus. Get out of bed. Let's make the bed. Um, Practice a little gratitude, whatever it may have been to start my mornings. It was, they give you some work to do. So after Save a Warrior, there's some work that you need to just work on, just internal reflection type stuff. So I was digging into that. I was reading a whole lot. Like I said, I had the ability to go to work. I could go to the firehouse. So every third day I was going to the firehouse and um, slowly changing my life. They make it real simple. They say it's really easy. The only thing you need to change is everything, and so I was like, all right, that sounds really, really, really tough. But I get it. I get it now. So that's what I was working towards. And it was tough. It was super challenging. Because the other layer to that is I went to Save a Warrior, right? So I got this experience, but my family, my wife, my kids, my extended family, they didn't. They didn't have that experience. So I left there being this broken individual, and I came back not so broken. And, they're like, well, what happened? What did you do? And they're asking
Mhm.
all these questions and wanting to know more. And there's really not a whole lot that can be told. They weren't there, and how many times too did I tell them things as far as, well, I won't do that again. I won't have a drink again. I won't get that drunk again. I won't walk out on my family again. All that stuff I always said, just trying to apologize and trying to be better. But, then I would do it again. So they were weary of that. They were like, yeah, this is just another thing that he's going to say he does and then not do it. So I really had to let my actions be my words, and that's what I do still today, is just
Mhm.
let that happen. Just if I say I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it, and they all know that now. And, but it's tough. There's a lot of things I don't like to do. Truth be told, I don't like making my bed. I don't necessarily like meditating every day, but I do it. I meditate every single day because I know that I need to do it. Sometimes it's more than once, just, depending on how my day's going. I lean into my faith. So, I grew up as a Catholic, just born and raised as Catholic. And there were times of that where it was very challenging for me because it really felt like this discipline, like if you don't do this, then you're going to hell. And the way that I had it was, because of all that I did, that's where I was going anyway, so it didn't really matter. So trying to lean back into that, turn back into that was a challenge for me at first. Now it's part of what I do every day. I go back, I read the Bible every single day. I surround myself with people that also have similar interest, and enjoy doing that. I don't always want to do it, but I do it because I know it helps me. I know that I'm here today in the position I am today because of all that. So again, there's a lot of things I don't like to do, but I just do them because I know it helps and it's the right thing. And then the other thing is I can't be hypocritical and tell someone else to do it when I'm not doing it myself. So there's a lot of accountability there, which I needed early on, in my recovery, in my healing. I needed a whole lot of accountability. Now I don't as much, but I still have it there. And then just being a gift of helping others be accountable too. So
Mhm. Mhm. So if someone was listening to this and I mean, I'm hearing you say you are choosing joy, basically. I mean, you're making active choices every day to do this work. And if someone was listening and they said, yeah, I would like to choose joy, but I'm too broken. I don't know how to take that first step. I don't know who to call. I don't know where to start, but I'm ready to stop suffering. Like, what would you say to them?
I would say, like, me too. Me too. I felt all that when I was at my lowest point. I again didn't feel like there was any hope out there, that there, like, where do you even get started? That's what I struggled with. Like, where do I even start? Like, I don't even know. The really great news again is just letting them know you're not alone. Me too. There are so many others in this world, unfortunately, that are struggling, and in similar places as to where I was and where others have been. So just know you're not alone. Know that you have so many people out there rooting for you, cheering for you, ready to just listen, ready to walk with you, not necessarily fix you, which that was a big light bulb moment too. But just know that there's hope out there. There's tons of resources. Um, I used to think that there was a resource issue, like we didn't have enough resources. I think that was part of it. But deep down, I think it's bigger than that. I think it's a trust issue, is what we really face as first responders. It's just really difficult for us to trust individuals, that you had talked about the boundaries and the barriers. Um, that stigma associated with the culture is just a really tough one to break. So there's that barrier of saying, yes, I need help, but I also want to keep my job. So how do I do that kind of thing? So just, again, the knowledge of like that's possible. There's so many ways to get the help now, be it clinicians in the area. There's a lot that we do on the peer support team to vet clinicians, to just not to teach them anything, but to help educate them, I would say, on the culture of first responders, what it's like, because we're different. I'm not saying that again to impress, but we're just different. We're weird. We have a dark sense of humor. We talk about things in a way that most people would be like, how messed up that sounds, Uh, but we do it just as a way to communicate to each other, and to support each other. So just to allow the clinicians that treat us know that. I've heard horror stories where, first responders will go in and the clinician will start crying. It's like, that's not what I
Wow.
expected. Or
Yeah.
they'll tell them to take their service weapon out in their vehicle so it's safe, and then the first responder will go out and they'll put themselves in the vehicle and leave with their service weapon because it was like, yeah, I'm not going anywhere without that, you know?
Yeah.
So it's educating there. We do a pretty good job of helping to identify the clinicians and thank goodness they're out there and stepping up in a way that we could have never imagined. There's resources as far as Save a Warrior. Save a Warrior is just one of many. Yeah, it's near and dear to my heart, so I'll always speak good things on it, and advocate for it. But there's many other programs that are out there that can help it. The important thing to remember also is that it's not a one size fits all. Everybody's dealing with different circumstances. Not everybody's story is the same. Everyone is unique. So it's, the treatment modality could look a little different. One thing that I had also done as part of my healing was I had a stellate ganglion block. I had three of them total. The first one was just before going to Save a Warrior. And what that allowed me to do was it's basically a reset of your fight or flight system. So it's a
Yeah,
numbing
I
medication.
don't know what that is. Okay.
So there's a bundle of nerves in your neck that are associated with fight or flight. So what they found, they do this a lot in the military, and they were treating back pain with the stellate ganglion block in the military. And what they found was that these soldiers that were getting this block, it was also removing a lot of their depression, a lot of their anxiety, mental wellness issues that they were having when they were coming back from deployment. So they're like, well, that's interesting. So they started to research it more and more and more. And now it's available for first responders and still military.
Yeah.
And again, what it does is just it helps reset. Like it doesn't take it away. I know a lot of individuals are like, well, I'm still on the job. I still need to be hyper vigilant. Like I still need to know when to run, when to fight, all that good stuff. It doesn't take it away. It just resets it. So for me, what it did was it took away the noise, like, the mouse wheel that I was
Yeah.
describing, like, it took a lot of that away for me. The first one that I had and also, to tell you how desperate I was, deathly afraid of needles. So, to get this done, it's a pretty large needle that they put in
Yeah. In
this
your
area
neck.
of your neck, which has a
Yeah.
lot of vital organs and things in your neck there. So I didn't just say, "Yeah, I'm on board. Let's do it." There was a lot to just lead up to that moment and say, "Yeah, I'm so desperate. Please give me something." So and the doctor that does it in this area, Dr. Kruer, he's amazing. He walked me through every single part of it, to just put me at ease and make me feel safe. And so I had it done on the way home. My wife was actually driving me home because you can't drive post procedure. So she was driving me home, and there was a police car that drove up behind us, right beside us, blew past us light and siren. And she was like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, yeah, why? She's like, did you not just see that? What happened? I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. And
Wow.
yeah, so it did not affect me at all. Whereas before, yeah, it would have startled me. I would have been like, oh, I wonder where they're going, but nothing, so it just, again, removed a lot of that for me to where I could go to Save a Warrior with an open mind, a little more relaxed. Yeah, I was still
Interesting.
anxious to go
Yeah.
there, but a little more relaxed and at ease, and be open to the conversation. I also did some EMDR intensive sessions that allowed me to process a lot of things post Save a Warrior. So again, I say that just to say there's so much out there. There's so many resources out there. If you're struggling, you don't know where to turn, turn to me. I'm always available. I don't want to see anybody struggle. I don't want to see anyone go through what I went through, if they don't have to. So I'm always available. I had this story that I didn't want to bother anybody. I didn't want to pick up the phone and bother them. And the thing that I tell people now is that's not on you to worry about, which really landed for me. It was like, yeah, so me having my own boundaries, if I can't answer the phone, I'm not going to answer the phone, but that's not for you calling me to have to worry about, So don't worry about bothering anyone. Pick up the phone and
Ah,
call. Somebody'd rather get
yeah.
that phone call and be there to listen, be there to point you in directions, give you suggestions on what may help you from lived experience that they had, versus hear that you're struggling and didn't reach out for help and then ultimately ended your life. So
Yeah.
reach out for help, get the help. There's so much out there. We've got a whole peer support team. We have a website that's out there. It's got a phone line just designated for peer support that you can call at any point in time. It's always monitored. It's always answered. We have a symposium coming up that you're going to be a part of, that we're super
Yeah.
excited to have you there to be a part of. And that came from Phil Hall. Like he is a person that I do a lot of this work with, and he shared a story and he was like, yeah, I just want an event out there that can bring first responders, their families, and all these resources that we have together, into a room to have this type of conversation, and let you know that you're not alone. You don't have to struggle. And these are the way that you can get out of, whatever you're struggling with. So that's a big one. This will be our 5th year of doing that. And again, it's just an event to allow you to connect and to know you're not alone.
Yeah.
But again, there's just so much, I just wake up and have gratitude and I have hope. And, I just try to be positive and have that flow out of me, so that others can see that it's possible. Because if it's possible for me, in a broken place that I was, it's possible for anybody, it can
Yeah.
happen for anyone. And so, just do that. Just pick up the phone. Just instead of saying I'm fine, say today's a pretty sucky day.
Mm.
Yesterday was a terrible day. I got in an argument with my wife, or my kids are looking at me like I have 2 heads, or whatever the case may be, say something. And then it starts that conversation. Like those are the amazing light bulb moments that I have, or when you're talking with somebody and, whatever it may be that you're struggling with, but then you hear on the other side of the conversation of, oh, I struggle with that too. And instantly, you're not alone, and it's like, oh my gosh, I
Yeah.
thought I was the only one. I thought that I was so unique that I was the only one that struggled with that. It's like, no, so many others do. So just pick up the
Yeah.
phone.
Yeah. I think that's so good. I tell people, because obviously my background's not as a first responder, but in healthcare and hospice and grief work, I would tell people if you're not talking about how you're feeling, that isolation just allows all of the stigma to get bigger. It just allows shame to turn into this giant monster. And I
Man,
think that moment that we start the conversation, it just makes all of that smaller. Like that is the antidote to the shame is starting to talk about it out loud. Yeah.
Starting to talk about it. Yeah. When you're comfortable, that's a big piece
Yeah.
too, is like just that vulnerability, because that does feel heavy. That shame does feel heavy. And not everybody is safe enough to be able to hear that conversation, so that's a big part of it too, is like it has to be a safe place. And that's the power of peer support, is like it's all confidential. Find somebody that you can go to where that conversation is going to be safe, because that's the last thing that I would want to happen, is for somebody to share something so vulnerable, and then I've heard horror stories of how bad that can go, and that's what we don't want. So being
Yeah.
confidential, being a safe enough place to share that, and not everybody deserves to hear your story. So
Mm, yeah. Yeah. That's a very good lesson. Yes. Kenny, you've taught me so much today. What I'll just ask, is there a question that I haven't asked you, or something that you would want a person like me who's not a first responder to know about your work, your life, or just anything I've missed?
yeah, I mean, I'm grateful. Like again, we're all humans. It's not uh, we're not any different than anyone else out there as far as first responders are concerned. The public may put us on a pedestal for being heroic, being courageous, but we're humans. I heard you say in a conversation about it's okay to not be okay, which really
Yes.
struck me, because we preach that. We've preached this "it's okay to not be okay" thing. So when I heard you say that, it was like, huh, that's interesting, because again, this is what we're saying. We're saying it's okay to not be okay. We're saying it's okay to have feelings. We're saying it's okay to let those feelings show. Yes, we still have a job to do. We still have to go out and go into burning buildings and pull people over and take care of, the bad guys and all of that. We still have to do that. So I can't go into a house fire crying,
Yeah, right.
so we still have to do those jobs. But I think the bigger point, and correct me please if I'm wrong, but I just wanted to address this. I think the bigger point is we can be human beings being human beings.
Yeah. Yeah,
You
that's a
know, we
powerful
can
statement.
we can just be ourselves. We can feel those emotions when it's safe enough to
Yeah.
be able to feel them, instead of covering them up, instead of
Yeah.
isolating, instead of just burying them so deep that you don't know if you'll ever have hope again. We can just be with it, and we can just be humans, and all of the imperfection that comes along with it, because that's really what makes us all so unique and so special, is just by being able to share that with everybody else. So I think, that would be the one thing, just the to hit the nail, on the head with, and just
Yeah.
drive home. It's just be yourselves, and know that there's ways to get help out there for you, so you're not struggling.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much, Kenny. And I'm going to make sure that I list in the show notes the website, the phone number, and all of these different resources that you've talked about today. So that'll be available to anyone who hears this.
Yes, please do. And like I said, I'm always available. You can even put my phone number out there. Really and truthfully, again, if I don't stand behind my word and saying that I'm here to help, then who am I to be able to do that? Um, yeah. If you need help, get help. That's why we're here.
Yeah.
So thank you
Awesome.
so much for having this platform. Thank you so much for just saying yes, and being in my life the way that you are, with what you're doing and what you're sharing with everybody out there. I'm excited just to have you, be in this space with us, and to bring the energy that you're going to bring in May.
Yeah.
To
Thank
have this.
you. Yeah. Definitely it feels like a privilege to be there, and I hope that I serve the group well.
I'm sure you will.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Kenny. Thanks. I really enjoyed this conversation.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for listening to this episode of Compass Stories. I'm your host, Veronica Sterling. And if you've enjoyed this, please subscribe to hear more and share it with others. Thank you for doing so. That's really helpful for me. To learn more about my message and connect, you can find me at www.veronicasterling.com.